It's all about truth. All of it. Every single thing. All boils down to the truth. We all want truth. The truth will set you free. All right, welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. This is Press for Truth Live. I am your host, Dan Dix. Today is Tuesday, January 26, 2016, and folks, I've got some good news. We're coming on the heels of some good news here in Canada. If you haven't heard, Gregory Alan Elliott has been found not guilty. Now, this is a precedent-setting case that really sets a precedent for free speech here in Canada. Now, if you're not familiar with this case, I'll quickly just break it down in a nutshell for you. What ended up happening was a kid made a video game where you could punch another feminist in the face, Anita Sarkeesian. And what ended up happening is a group of feminists basically launched I don't know, what could amount to an internet witch hunt, basically. Making that video game. And for that, folks, Gregory Alan Elliott was arrested, and he's been spending the last 3.5 years going through legal battles trying to clear his name for simply expressing his opinion. That's what it comes down to here in 2015, 2016, is that if you want to express your opinion online, you could potentially be struck down by some feminists taking you to court. Now, again, as I say, we have good news that the court ruled in favor of free speech. So again, it's a good day for Canadians. So on that note, we're going to be today speaking with Greg Renouf, independent journalist. And before we cut to Greg, though, I want to show you some footage that he captured himself of a particular feminist that, well, I guess you could say it pretty much went viral shortly after some of the footage that Greg captured. This lady basically became a bit of an internet meme. So this is a little taste of some of what Greg does. He goes to protests and he kind of weeds out some of the troublemakers often. So here's a little taste of some of the feminist rallies that he's covered, where there was a men's rights rally and some feminists showed up to share their thoughts. And when we come back from the clip, we'll be joined via Skype by Greg Renouf.
Can you shut the fuck up for a second too, so I can read my fucking list, so you guys can actually answer those questions. This is a list of the things that we're working towards. Now, if you would shut the fuck up for the 50th billionth time,
these are things we agree on. Actually,
these are things that we're agreeing on. And these are things that you've actually all got skewed fucking views on. You think that feminists are trying to take away your fucking rights, but as a matter of fact, what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to work on the same things that you're working on, but except the fact that you're so you're just too busy hating women.
You're a hate
can't
group.
fucking
You're a
see
fucking hate
that we're
group.
trying to actually work on those same situations. Feminists do not want you to have to make alimony payments. Alimony is set up to combat the fact that women have been historically expected to prioritize domestic duties over professional goals, thus minimizing their earning potential if their traditional marriages end. The assumption, I'm reading, fuckface. The assumption that wives should make babies instead of money is part of patriarchy. Feminists do not want you to be made or killed in industrial accidents or toil in coal mines while we do cushy secretarial work and various yarn-themed activities. The fact that women have long been shut out of dangerous industrial jobs, by men, by the way, is part of patriarchy.
What I've heard so far is frankly a lot of anger from you, which hold on, let me finish, okay? And I'm not saying we don't have a right to be angry. I think we all have a right to be angry. But what exactly is accomplished by calling people bitches and stuff like that when you're trying to with the conversation.
That's not
Why?
Are you for serious right now?
Yes, I'm quite serious. What is the point of that? How does that?
What difference does it make?
I'm
tired of being I'm tired of getting my fucking ass trampled on because I'm the nice girl. I'm docile. I'm compliant. I'm the perfect fucking woman. No, fuck that shit. Fuck that noise. I'm not gonna be fucking compliant because, we should be nice. Fuck that.
Wow, that is someone who has some serious issues, to say the least. And joining me on the line right now is the man who shot that footage, is Greg Renouf. Greg, thanks so much, man, for taking the time to speak with us here on Press for Truth Live.
Hey, nice to finally be on your show.
So, first of all, I want to get your thoughts. I want to talk about the Gregory Alan Elliott case and what you've discovered pre and post verdict. But first of all, just coming off of that video clip, I mean, what's it like being in the presence of such a psycho like that? And is she kind of as she appeared to be in real life?
I mean, she was definitely went there to cause an interruption, and definitely went there to get a message across and to disturb people a little bit. But she wasn't just a crazy person who ran in there and screamed out words. I mean, a few of us spoke with her afterwards, and she settled down. She didn't come there angry. She came there to put on a show. Yeah. And she came there to take some of the focus of the meeting. I was filming a men's rights meeting there, and she came to take some of the focus for herself.
Well,
she got a lot of fame.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, she did. She did take the focus for herself and ended up becoming famous for it. But, I think it's important to differentiate between actual feminists, people fighting for true equality, and this new wave of what we're referring to as third wave feminists. So what do you have to say about the differences there, about what real feminism is versus what we're seeing today?
I come from a long line of feminists in my family. My grandmother was one of the originals. She was in the war. My American grandmother in the war in the U.S., she was an aluminum airplane welder who built bombers. My English grandmother was a draftsperson who designed guns. They were the first women of their generation to take the right and to exercise the opportunity to have a career and to have professions.
So you clearly have nothing against feminists.
My mom was one of the first women to get a mortgage in Canada. She walked in the bank and they said, "What, you're a single woman?" And she said, "Yeah, what are you going to do about it?" And she demanded it and got it. I mean, feminists have done some great things to make our society fair, right? When you look at people like the woman who's screaming in the video, if she ever buys herself a condo or a house, she owes it to the feminists before her who demanded that women have equal rights.
Mm-hmm. And she was actually interrupting a men's rights protest. Is that right?
Well, the men's rights protest was interrupted by a group of masked anarchists, some connected to G20 type people, who set off the fire alarm. And then when the fire alarm went off, everyone had to go outside. And then she marched in her white jacket, fishnet stockings, and high heels, and started screaming at everyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, now it's progressed to the point of having feminists actually having people arrested for making comments against their leader on Twitter. So tell us a little bit about this case, because you've been covering it right from the beginning. Where are we at now with the Gregory Alan Elliott case? And I want to get into what you've discovered post-trial as well.
I'll tell you where I got started. You'll find it interesting because it's connected to the G20. I was looking. I found an article in the Toronto Star written by a journalist called Antonia Zabisis, and it was about a woman named Mandy Hiscox, who was arrested and imprisoned for helping organize the violence in 2010. And she was just put in jail. And when she went to jail, she stood up in front of the court and she said, "I don't believe in the legal system. I don't believe in society. F you, F everyone." And then when she got to jail, this Toronto Star writer wrote a story posing her as a prisoner's right activist inside of jail and as a brave person. So I just wrote an article criticizing her article. I said, how could the Toronto Star take this person and misrepresent her to the city? The response I got was the writer said, "I'm doing an article on stalkers. Would you like to be in it?" Seriously. And that article turned out to be an article she was writing on Gregory Alan Elliott.
Ooh.
A couple months later, about a couple weeks later, I was in Kensington Market in Toronto. And did you ever see the Occupied, Dan? The big movable house that the homeless people at Occupy lived in?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, I was in front of the Occupied, and I was with a man named who lived inside the Occupied, and we're talking. All of a sudden, this van drives up, and he yells out at John Yerb, who I was with, and he says, "Hey, John, how you doing?" And it was Gregory Alan Elliott. Gregory Alan Elliott was the designer of the Occupied. And so he's an artist, right? And he actually, I noticed him even before he had signs. His art was across the city. I just didn't know it was him. I met him. I said, "Hey, I was just told that I'm going to be in a story about you." And we started talking. And I got to see that it seemed like something wasn't quite right with the charges. He was charged with criminal harassment of 3 women. Stephanie Guthrie, who's a feminist who leads a group called Women in Toronto Politics. She's very connected to city councillors. Paisley Ray, who works very closely with the Toronto police, including the officers who pressed charges against Elliott, and another woman who's more auxiliary. He was charged with criminal harassment for sending too many tweets to them over Twitter. The basis of the case was that they felt he was creepy, and they felt scared because of his tweets. And so what happened was the police came and knocked on his door one morning, and they came and took him out in handcuffs and brought him to jail. They held him in jail for a day or two, I think. And then they took him to his bail hearing, and the Crown was arguing to keep him in jail the whole time of his trial. Right? All he did was send tweets. The people who smashed up Toronto in the G20, they got easier bail terms. They were allowed, right? So it was something was really wrong and unfair and strange about it.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the case came along into court I started following it. It was the second day of trial, I think, when the officer who arrested him testified. And he said, no threats were ever made. No sexual innuendos were made. It was just based upon him being creepy and sending too many tweets.
Right.
How could someone go to jail for sending too many things over Twitter within the rules of Twitter?
Yeah.
Twitter. So then I followed the trial for 3 years now, and the guy has lost the right to use the internet from the moment he was arrested. He had his name run through the newspapers and called a stalker, and some of the less reputable publications like Jezebel said that he threatened people. Even yesterday on 1010 News Talk Radio here in Toronto, Desmond Cole said that he was charged for sexually harassing tweets, which wasn't true.
Yeah. Well, it seems that not only are some of the media getting things wrong, but the very own court system got things wrong as well. In fact, this is something that you pointed out, and I'll just reference your article here from your website, where you posted not long ago an article that says, "Court ruling makes serious mistake judging Gregory Alan Elliott's character." And in this article here, you outline how there was an imposter, somebody who was fake, set up a fake account, changing one letter in the name, and basically putting all these homophobic slurs, and it actually made its way into the court. The judge even read about this. Now, something that's interesting I want to show the viewers is that this, of course, was posted on the 23rd. Let's take a look at this article right here, posted by Vice, which was posted on the 24th, which is pretty much a word-for-word article based on your article, and not much credit given to you, the writer. So anyways, that's something I wanted to point out to the viewers that I found interesting, that Vice is now becoming more toting the line and becoming more mainstream, has pretty much plagiarized your article. But the point is, the important thing is that you uncovered, which the judge couldn't even notice, the fact that this was a fake account and he was being completely set up.
You know, we don't know how that fake tweet got into the evidence right now. That's still being figured out. It was lettered evidence, which means it was introduced during the case, not by the police. The problem with the case, one of the big problems with this case, was that the evidence collection was a complete sham. They used a software called Sysmos that sucked up all the tweets of his tweets and of the people who were said to be his victims, and they put them into a spreadsheet. Problem with it is that you can't collect tweets unless the tweets have not been deleted, and you can't collect them, or if someone's locked their account, you can't collect them. They could have gone and sent a warrant to Twitter and said, give us these tweets. For some reason, the court didn't do that. And so somehow this tweet ended up in the judge's hands. Oh, if the judge saw it was only on paper for the judge, and if it was just for me on paper, I may not have even seen this. But I clicked the account link, and I saw it was a fake account with 45 tweets. So we don't know how the evidence got in there. That will be an interesting story to find out.
Yeah.
But the court was so inexperienced and so bad at managing the evidence, and the evidence wasn't even forensically solid because it wasn't collected properly. So it's a mess. And so what happened was there are newspapers around the world that say Greg, after he's an innocent man, but he also is a homophobe.
Right.
So after being dragged through the mud, the court destroyed his name once more.
So they're still essentially dragging this guy through the mud to this day. And I mean, this is what I want to point out to the audience, which is what Greg does. Is he weeds out the troublemakers. Again, it's about doing the research to find who is actually causing the problems here. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you first started looking into Occupy, environmentalist movements, various activist groups, back when you first were involved with Vancouver Occupy. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was with Occupy Vancouver from the very beginning. I was one of the very first members, and I got involved, and all of a sudden I noticed the same thing I heard from people in Toronto, was that it doesn't seem quite right. Things are happening and being directed from somewhere, and there are personalities who seem to be leaders, though it was a leaderless movement. There were people pushing black bloc and violent tactics. In fact, at Occupy Vancouver, during one march, a cop got hit in the face with a flagpole during a mini riot. And what I learned during Occupy, then coming to Toronto, the same thing, that most activism in Canada seems to be led by the same group of people when it comes to environmentalism and things like Occupy. And so when you see people marching on the street, in Vancouver, I started noticing it's all the same people. Then I came to Toronto, and they instantly saw me and they felt nervous because they knew who I was.
Yeah.
And then I started following Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, all across Canada, and it's all the same club. Most of the big protests you've heard of over the last few years were run by the same people, but it's led to grassroots.
Yeah, and what you ended up discovering, in fact, was a lot of these movements that appear to be grassroots were, in fact, accepting money from various NGOs. In fact, you've put together comprehensive charts proving this. That's showing that these are essentially, I suppose you could call them paid protesters, or just people being completely bought off to sell a message. What do you think it is?
You know, I would give credit to actually collecting the information of where the money came from to National Post writer Vivian Krause.
Okay.
If you want to really see someone digging deep into the money, she traveled down to America, looked at the tax records, and figured out that very large foundations are funding most of the activism in this country. The one that most people know about is called Tides Foundation, which they act like a money laundering activity. Like American interests give money from Tides USA to Tides Canada, and then it goes to organizations, and you don't quite see where the money flows. But if you also look at the anti-pipeline protests, one of the major funders is the Rockefeller Foundation. Rockefeller invented pipeline politics. He used to buy a farm between a oil refinery and a pipeline, cut off the pipeline, starve out the refinery, and then buy the refinery at a discount. And also the other major funders is the Pew Foundation. Pew was the Sunoco oil company. If you look at the money for a lot of the activism here, it's coming from very rich Americans. And some of those very rich Americans invented the oil industry. So the people who invented the oil industry in America are paying for the protesting of Canadian pipelines. It is a very confusing situation. And they're very close to the people who are doing violence in the G20. You look in BC, there's a Unistoten camp, which they are threatening and attacking pipeline workers so they don't do work. I mean, they're not protesting. They're going and threatening them and saying, we're going to take away your equipment and hurt you. Mm-hmm. And they're funded by rich Americans.
Well, I mean, calling out people for their violence is something that is necessary, really. I think people have to be held accountable, essentially, when they're going to call for violence. I should probably monitoring the chat here today, but I'm not one for censoring free speech. I'm not going to delete you or block you in the chat unless you're calling for violence. It's just something that we really shouldn't stand for. Now, you mentioned that these guys are nervous when you are around, and I got to say, Greg, I mean, it takes a lot of bravery to do what you do, to go to these types of protests and to film these guys, to try to weed out the troublemakers, the informants, the undercover cops, or the guys just trying to cause all-out violence. Has this ever caused any actual harm to you? Have these guys escalated this beyond just words?
Well, they're very aware of me. My favorite moment was last year during the Burnaby Mountain protests. I was in Toronto. All of a sudden, a swarm of tweets run across saying, "Warning, Greg Renouf is in Vancouver." So they're very aware of me. In Toronto one night, though, I was in Kensington Market, right about 10 meters away from where I first met Gregory Elliott. And I ran into a group of Black Bloc people who came and smashed me down in the head with a flagpole, left me bleeding on the ground after a gang kicked me and threw me down, and hospitalized me when the funny part was, when the guy who was running after me with the flagpole, he said, "You call us anarcho-primitivists?" He was unhappy with the words I used to describe him.
Oh, okay. So you were beaten down by one of these guys, and he was unhappy with the words that you used to describe him. What an awful thing.
And in Occupy Toronto, there was a meeting about me that they were trying to get me thrown out. Mm-hmm. And I went to go to it. I was invited. And right at the door, there was a man trying to block me. And he pushed me and shoved me out of the way. His name was Alex Hundred. He was put in prison for 17 months as the key organizer of the G20.
Yeah.
So they've used violence. They say they don't use violence, but if you push hard enough, they will, because they don't want this to be exposed. Once the secret gets out that it's the same people running the protests across the country, they stop being so effective.
Yeah, well, I agree. And when it comes to the labels and the terms, I think that's another important one. And something I know my girlfriend at home is watching this, and I'm sure she'd want me to ask you this right now, is that your use of the word anarchist, some feel are often misplaced or misused, because, true anarchy believes in voluntary exchange, where you're not ruled by a ruler, but you, through voluntary exchange, enter into a contract with somebody else. It's the non-aggression principle. Whereas these guys who dress up in black and call themselves anarchists and smash up the banks are not really true anarchists. I mean, I would implore you to, next time you talk about the guys dressing in black smashing up bank windows, to just throw in the word left. These are a free society and free association with one another. So there is a little bit of a difference in the word there.
Yeah, actually, when I first started, I was just writing anarchist because I didn't even know the difference. I didn't even really know much about anarchy at the time. It wasn't my interest. But I started writing anarchists, and I would get attacked by people who didn't like the people I was writing about, but they're unhappy I was calling them anarchists. Yeah. They call themselves anarchists, but what they really are is the official title for this group is anarcho-syndicalists. Mm-hmm. And syndicalists, basically, the whole world should be run by one big union.
Right.
And the key and the most famous anarcho-syndicalist is Noam Chomsky. Mm. So yeah, I have to be more accurate with that.
Well, how can they not differentiate that between, an all-out communist system or just socialism under the rule of a dictator? I mean, do they not see that what they're calling for is essentially the same thing that the whole New World Order system is trying to create?
Well, it is what they're calling for, right? And they know that's what they're calling for, but you can't call it that anymore because people figured it out and they don't buy it. So you had to give it a new name.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at it, back in the Soviet days, they had a concept of internationalism, which was the third, fourth international, where countries around the world came together to have this communist or grouping or on a global level.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Naomi Klein, she calls herself a new internationalist. Well, we're not Soviet, right? But we are new internationalists. You can't say I'm a Marxist anymore because the world won't put up with that. You can't say I'm a communist because I've lived in Russia and I've seen what happens, and it's very clear that it doesn't work, right? And it's horrible, and people get dragged out at night and killed and sent to gulags. It was a bad, failed experiment. So they relabel it, and the anarchist label, in my view, is a way to reach out to youth. Right? They connect to the punk rock subculture, and they bring youth who want to be angry and smash things. And some of them know that they're pushing a Marxist communist agenda. Others don't. But ultimately, it's just rebranded.
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of what. Movements that have been coerced, that's what happens to them. They start shifting the solution. The focus is shifted into an area where the solution calls for more power to the state, more power by the very system that's trying to screw these people. And what I like that you do, Greg, is not only connecting these dots, but sometimes you do so in very interactive charts. I want to show the audience here on your website some of the charts that you have. I mean, you got ones on COP21, Elizabeth May, the Gregory Alan Elliott trial, of course, Justin Trudeau's cabinet. Here I have one open about tides because you were talking about that, and I just want to show people how this works, where you just hover over a person, you see who that is, it says who they are connected to, and you can do this for any one of these charts. I want to show them this Justin Trudeau cabinet here.
That Tides one, just to give you a real quick info on it, It's very interesting. This Tide Foundation, the American billionaire-founded group, they funded an illegal set of psychedelic medical experiments on First Nations in BC.
Yeah, I see the title of your chart here, Tides Canada, Illegal Psychedelic Medical Experiments on BC First Nations. So what did you discover there?
It was a Dr. Gabor Mate, who was actually involved in Occupy Vancouver, and he's involved in the same club. He found that, ayahuasca? It's a psychedelic drug from a root from South America. Mm-hmm. And the idea is you can use ayahuasca to treat people for addictions. I've even heard it may be good or not, it may be positive. But what this group did, there was a Rockefeller on the board, and it was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. This group called MAPS did tests on people inside of a BC First Nation and gave them the psychedelic drug and gave them this treatment, but it was completely under the board and hidden away. And I don't even think that the people involved, they were alcoholics in a faraway First Nation, may not even be able to consent very well. But this is mangle, this stuff, right? These American billionaires and Rockefellers coming here and funding psychedelic medical experiments on First Nations. We're not upset when people were doing food experiments on First Nations. Mm-hmm. Yeah, too much.
Well, you're trying to get to the bottom of things, so I don't understand. Guests to have on my show. As soon as I announced that I was having your guest, I had all kinds of people said, "Oh, you're going to have that guy on." It's like, look, people, what he does, if you're doing something wrong, he's going to find out. I don't.
I've written about them, right? One of the guys who was complaining is a professor in a university in Alberta. I wrote a story about him. He said to the media that the Canadian government is intentionally trying to make salmon extinct so that First Nations in BC will all die. He's a professor. But what they're doing is they're trying to stir up people, and they're trying to create anger by making these crazy stories. He was very angry that I wrote that story. And so when he saw it, he was very angry.
Well, I've seen a few people get pretty angry around you. Sometimes when you guys call out certain people. In fact, there's a clip I'm going to air. I just want to show you of a particular person who you caught some footage of this, and this is just a short clip. But this is just to give you a taste of the kind of things that Greg sometimes finds, where sometimes you can weed out who the posers are. And this is a very brief clip of actually Lawrence McCurry one time suggesting to somebody that he's actually a protester and not an activist. Watch how he reacts.
Talk shit about me. Say it to my goddamn face, boy. Say it to my face, boy.
I just did.
That's right.
I just did.
Yeah. I'm a man. Got it? I'm a man. I stand up. I stand up against my enemies. That's what I do.
Derek? Derek, you think
you know it. You know it. You know it.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Hey, I'm voicing my opinion.
You don't just scream it, damn it.
Hey, sometimes you gotta do that. I don't let people walk over me and talk shit about me, Lawrence. You do it again. You know what I'm fucking sacrificing here. I'm against the Harper regime. I'm against corrupt government. I'm against corrupt police that are not accountable. I've been out there on the front lines, Lawrence. I've been getting arrested and targeted. I've had cameras broken. When you start going through that shit, then you become a fucking activist. You got it? You ain't can't fucking criticizing me for not being an activist.
That is quite the reaction for just simply being told that you're not an activist. I mean, when you get on the defensive like that, I think it speaks volumes. I think that lends it just proves that what you're doing is showing some of the phonies, really. I think people appreciate the work, because you know what, in this movement we do have to be held accountable when certain posers get up there, and I just want to let you know, Greg, that I'm glad that guys like you are out there actually showing people who the real guys are. And hey, if you've been following Press for Truth, you've probably dug into me, so I figure I must be okay in your books.
Yeah, you had some good recommendations. When we met on the street the first time, you were a nice guy. I think it was in 2011. I try to not upset people, but I write what I know. I try to be fair, but in this particular subculture of this activist culture in Canada, it's very tightly knit, and they are built upon rejecting people. Now, here's where we get to Gregory Alan Elliott, right? Mm-hmm. Stephanie Guthrie, one of the alleged victims, mm-hmm. she was attacking Ben Spur for his video game, and Gregory stood up and he said, what you're doing is every bit as vicious as a face punching game. She said, I'm going to stick the internet on him. Do you want to come, guys? Now, the judge, in his decision, he said that her request to stick the internet on people could be explained in no other metaphor than violence, right? Mm-hmm. She was attacking this poor 18-year-old kid who made a video game, calling him a misogynist.
It's worse than what he did. He was just talking about a video game. They're actually sicking the internet on this kid.
And it wasn't against women, because the first one he made was about men. Mm-hmm. And if you really think about the video game of punching someone in the face, it's like a voodoo doll, right? You get your anger out. It's a game. It's not tasteful. I wouldn't make a game out punching someone in the face. I felt a little unhappy about it, but it wasn't. This woman who is in Toronto, Stephanie Guthrie, is in power. She's connected to city councillors. She has all these followers. And she goes to this guy in Sault Ste. Marie, or wherever he was, who has 30 followers on his Twitter account, and then sicks the internet on him and tries to get the newspaper to take away his job or say he's a bad guy, and it's bullying. And Greg stood up, and this is where people say that Gregory Alan Elliott is a hero because he went through this crap, but I think the biggest thing he did for all of us was he was one of the people, the few, who stood up and said to Stephanie Guthrie, this is not right. What you're doing is every bit as vicious as the face punching game. Well, and from that point, he became their enemy, and he is set down the path where he found himself in jail.
Mm-hmm. Now, in this PC age of politically correct. I'm curious, just how does this whole notion of cyberbullying play into what these feminists were trying to do by sicking the internet, essentially a witch hunt on this kid? Is that cyberbullying, and has this whole concept been utilized throughout this case somehow?
I've experienced cyberbullying myself because of what I do, particularly during Occupy. At one point, this one woman in Vancouver, every time a journalist came and contacted me on Twitter, she went to them and said, he's a sexist, he attacks women, he's evil, he's mentally ill, she even said to people. Mm-hmm. And every single person who talked to me, she attacked them. That's affecting my life, right? That's my ability to communicate and get jobs in journalism. Hmm. You take Amanda Todd, the girl who killed herself a few years ago. People were taking her naked picture and blackmailing her and terrorizing her until she killed herself, right? That's serious. We do have to think about these things. Mm-hmm. But in the case with Gregory Alan Elliott, he made no threats. There was no sexual issues. He settled quite a few tweets. But many of them were going to hashtags for political events. And the judge said, you have every right to do that. But he got into an argument with them, and they shut him down very effectively. And is what happens.
Well, what happened with the city councilor who was essentially calling for cyberbullying? We have a clip. I want to cut to the clip, but before we do, tell us a little bit about what exactly was she calling for.
This was an interesting moment, actually. It was one of the early days that Gregory Alan Elliott and Stephanie Guthrie knew each other. And they both went to a meeting at Women in Toronto Politics, Guthrie's group. She was invited him there. When he arrived, she tweeted him saying, "Welcome, Greg, happy to have you here." And it was about, it had a couple of city councilors on the table talking about cyber relations and communicating on the internet using Twitter. And Shelley Carroll, who was a very lefty city councilor here in Toronto, curiously enough, her assistant, who works on the city payroll, spent 14 months in prison as an organizer at the G20. Quite an interesting fact. But she stood up in front of these young ladies, and Gregory Alan Elliott was in the room, and Guthrie was there, and she said, people attack us for what we do, and why don't we have our own cyberbullies? Why aren't we cyberbullying people? This was 30 days before the event happened. Everything broke down. And also there was another city councilor, Wong Tam, who was there, and she said, someone threatened me earlier today. They called me the C word. And they're all trolls. But it's not so bad to be called the C word, because if you are, then you can point them out. And here's the main problem, is Guthrie, after she had the incident with Bendel and Spur, she did a presentation at TEDx. And it's all about why don't feed the trolls is a bad idea.
Right.
The whole idea is to feed the trolls and take advantage of the trolls to get yourself publicity. Anyway, but if you look at what the city councilor says, we have to think that Stephanie Guthrie and the other alleged victims didn't have a good role model. Maybe I want to play that now. Just tell you a little something afterwards.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead to this clip of the city councilor essentially suggesting the tactic of cyberbullying.
Twitter doesn't go ape every time he says that, and I'm disappointed every time. What a horrible thing to say. Oh, we can't take care of widows and orphans. I beg your pardon? I don't even get a Twitter that says I beg your pardon. Hashtag Teal Polly. Shouldn't I? Shouldn't I? I don't think we use it nearly as much as we should to call people out on things like that. We get called out, heaven knows, by the cyber bullies that haven't all got mentioned. Where's our cyber bullies? Why aren't we bullying the people that say things like that?
Wow.
She's on the police board and she's telling people to commit a crime.
Yeah, I put two and two together, right? She's essentially telling them to do it.
I think this leads us to a very important point where we are today. Gregory Alan Elliott has been exonerated. And he's getting a lot of attacks right now from people who are trying to say that it's unfair to the women, that they were still bullied, etc., whatever. And now what's happening is we have a divide. We have the radical feminist side who are attacking and trying to discredit Elliott. Mm-hmm. And we have people who are on Elliott's side who are looking at trying to protect him, but also there's attacking going on against Stephanie Guthrie and the others. Mm-hmm. So we can't adore and love Stephanie Guthrie for sticking the internet on people and taking this attitude. But can we be angry at Stephanie Guthrie? People are. And I don't think they're helping Greg right now by being angry and making videos mocking her. And I actually kind of don't feel bad for Stephanie Guthrie, because for someone to act this way and be this way, something must hurt her, right? Mm-hmm. But more important, who's backing her? She has a city councilor sitting there telling her people to be a cyberbully. And now the attacks. We could attack Stephanie Guthrie. It's really easy. You make a video and you laugh at her, right? Mm-hmm. But we're missing the real point here. Gregory Alan Elliott was brought to the police by these feminists. Mm-hmm. But the police made the decision to proceed and make charges. And the Crown made the decision to proceed in the trial. Mm-hmm. The job of the cops and of the Crown, for the taxpayers and for the good of justice, is to very carefully evaluate any case they take to court.
Yeah.
This case was a joke.
You know, something went very, very wrong here. Like, what about the fact of the 7 or 8 officers or whatever it was who showed up to Gregory's house to arrest him based on a couple of tweets? What are these guys thinking?
Yeah, and how did the officer who did the arrest, Banglet, he said directly on the stand there were no threats made. Curiously, one of the alleged victims live tweeted as the arresting officer did a presentation on Elliott's case while it was still in court. So the victim is live tweeting the cop, and the victim knows the cop for a long time. Very wrong, right? Cops don't publicly tweet out presentations about a case in court. And they definitely don't have the victim do that. Mm-hmm. And so we could be angry at these feminist girls, and I am a little bit of unhappiness with what they did, but I've thought about this a lot, and maybe we should actually feel bad for them, and we should be angry with the system.
Well, it's kind of
even if you're not political, right?
Yeah. Yep.
This case cost how much money and took how much time and how many resources, and who could have been tried instead and taken off the street for a real criminal? Mm-hmm. They made this decision. They wasted taxpayers' money, and they had this horrible injustice. Gregory Alan Elliott lost his job, his reputation, and his savings. Mm-hmm. If we're going to be angry at someone, let's be angry at the system. Yeah. Let's ask questions about the cops who made this go through.
Well said.
And let's get someone to ask that. Let's ask questions about the Crown, who should be competent enough to figure what everyone observing it did.
Yeah.
It was a weak case.
Yeah. Well said, Greg. I mean, the time you can't fight fire with fire. The time to get angry about somebody who got angry just doesn't make sense. So I would have to agree. Fighting fire with fire is not the way to go about this. If you have an issue with somebody being aggressive and angry and mad, then you don't get aggressive and angry and mad just like they did. You're kind of sinking to their level. But that brings us to the question, what do we do then? What are the solutions? And I would have to agree with you. Let's look to the root cause of the problem, the state that has these laws and is using the police force to enact them in the first place. And let's try to make sure that we keep our Canadian rights the way they were here and not have them stripped like they were during the G20. You know, I think it's kind of like in the clip there that we played with the feminist, your friend, I think he's called Undercover Kitty, was saying to the lady, you know, hey, you seem very, very angry. How is that going to accomplish anything? And it was an honest question, and it was a good question. And the answer is, it's not. It's not going to accomplish anything. In fact, you're only going to rile up the other side. So really, let's focus on the solution, the state itself, and where this problem originates from. So I'd have to agree with that.
And if you're for or against the state, you should be unhappy about this. If you're against the state, you should be unhappy that the state was able to intrude on people's lives. If you're just an average person who's a taxpayer, you should be royally pissed off that your money was wasted.
Yeah, at the very least. I mean, at the very least. So on that note, Greg, let's tell the people who are watching this, if they want to continue to learn more about the case, learn more from you, shoot out all of the links, your Twitter, your website, to where people can go to hear more from you.
Okay. For me, you want to just tell them to read it out?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let
okay.
people know where they can find you on Twitter and your site.
My Twitter is Grenouf, Grenouf. Mm-hmm. My website is genuinewitty.com, GenuineWitty.com. And you can also search Genuine Witty in YouTube to see many of the videos I put together, a couple hundred over the last few years.
Yeah.
Including many of the MRA and feminist fights at University of Toronto, which all of them were entertaining and interesting.
Yeah, another one you caught was where was it? Ryerson, I think, hazing of students. It looked like something straight out of Dazed and Confused or something, where they were hazing a bunch of students there. But that's for maybe for another show, another topic, a whole another talk there. So, Greg, we're going to have all of those links in the description for all the viewers at home. I want to thank you, man, for taking the time to speak with us today. Any final thoughts? Anything that you wanted to make sure you said today?
If you care about Gregory Alan Elliott, people out there listening, I know there are many of you, let's stop doing base attacks on the women who were accusing him. Let's think about them as victims also, that something is wrong with this system that encouraged and enabled them to be this way.
Yeah.
Let's focus on police. Let's focus on the city councilors. Let's focus on the Crown. Let's ask questions. Let's ask our politicians to ask questions. Let's write letters to the police station. Let's write letters to our MPs, our MLAs. Let's focus on the right people, because we're not going to fix anything by yelling at the people who are accusing him. Mm-hmm. And like the woman in the red head, it's easy to be angry at her.
Yeah.
But, I sat down and talked with her afterwards. She was quite reasonable. Well, one last point about her, she worked for a city councilor too.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, on that note, I would have to say that's good advice. Let's just stick to the root of the problem and not bicker and argue over the small things, but actually hack at the root of the problem. That is the system and the state. Greg Renouf, thanks so much for joining us today. Take care, man.
Thank you.
All right, guys, that was independent journalist Greg Renouf, who is now based in Toronto. And as we said, it was, coming into the show, people were telling me it was slightly controversial. But, again, I think accountability in these movements is of the utmost importance. And if you have something, if you're hiding something, then you're going to be worried about a guy like Greg Renouf. But essentially, I would have to listen to his advice. Let's not call for violence. Let's not continue to argue and fight fire with fire. But let's look to the solutions of the problem that are taking away 3.5 years of the lives of people like Gregory Alan Elliott. And let's just focus on the real problem, the state itself. So that's all for this week, folks. I want to thank you once again for tuning in to Press for Truth Live. We'll see you right back here, same time, same channel next week. Until then, keep fighting the good fight, my friends.